Yeah.
Okay, cool. A lot of this stuff you already know, but some of it can be a refresher. I tried to, and there's a little bit more advanced stuff in there, but yeah, basically we're just gonna go over some common AP style like errors and some tips to help you all get in like clean copies. What's the button?
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you, Nancy.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I was saying, of course, it's your fault, John.
Yeah, always me, you know. But okay, let's go ahead and so I think something that's beneficial when it comes to like any sort of style is understanding why we use it. So, you know, we use AP style here. Most media organizations are going to use AP style. And the core kind of purpose behind AP style is like to avoid confusion on the reader's behalf when it, you know, comes to certain phrasings or words or terms. And then kind of set a standardized approach for writers so that we know that, okay, in these instances, this is how you phrase this, you know, and so really we're just trying to avoid confusion at all levels. You know, and a good way to think about like AP style, I think, is to think about it in terms of something like coding, where it's like, okay, we use these certain characters in this situation because it means this, which is, I know is very vague, but it kind of helped me understand a little bit of at least when I should be like, okay, I need to look this up. Yeah, so really, you know, you should be checking the style guide. I know it obviously costs money to get the AP style thing, but it's not, I think it's like $20, and then a hard copy, things like 15. And then obviously we have the 2015 ones here in the office. If you want to take a look through those, they're outdated, but a lot of the information still should be solid. But you want to be checking these guides. Oh, does somebody have something? Okay. But you want to be checking these guides, specifically the AP style book, whenever there's like, you're doing something weird that you're not entirely sure of. So, you know, if you want to know when to capitalize a title or something, go ahead and look it up in the AP style book. But it's important to understand how to search for stuff like that. So if you're wondering like how to, like the way the AP style book works is it's just like, you know, there will be a whole entry on titles, you know. So if you want to know whether to capitalize a title, don't search like director of so-and-so, just search, you know, titles, and it will give you like how to do titles. Let me think, it should give you examples too generally. But in addition to the AP style book, we also have what's called the Cougar style book. And this basically is like, you know, going to cover stuff that is, you know, if it is in the AP style book, it's vague, you know, the Cougar style book will give a little bit more clarity. And, you know, we do have some slight differences from AP style that are covered in the Cougar style books. Stuff like, you know, when it comes to referring specifically to the university, you know, like doing UH on first reference instead of, you know, spelling it out. And then the Cougar style book also has a lot of good information that's just kind of background to the university. So, you know, it'll be like if you look up Cullen, it will tell you who Cullen was and why he's significant, why his name is all over this place. You know, so it's a good tool for stuff that's not covered in the AP style book. And it's also a good tool for just kind of getting interesting little tidbits of information that can help you build a story later on. But yeah, these are the basics of style. Now, this is one of the ones I wanted to cover just right off rip. I think the two of you, again, have this down pretty well. But for a lot of people, when it comes to quotes, they seem to struggle. So like the way I made this up. This isn't like, you know, journalism shit. Like this is just the two types of quotes I see the most. Split quotes, where it's like, you know, you do attribution in the middle. That'll be for your longer quotes, or if you want to have like conjoin two separate quotes. So like in this example, I love journalism, Lomax said, even if it's a dying industry. But the important thing to note about a split quote is, notice this, right? I can't highlight it. It will always, the first part of the quote will always end in a comma. And this goes 90% of the time. So, you know, I love journalism, quote, or a comma, close quote, and then full sentence, Lomax said, period. You know, and then the second half of the quote, we open it back up, it's a new sentence. And then that's a full sentence right there. You know, so for the vast majority of the time, you know, even if you're doing a solid quote, it's going to end in a comma, and then you're going to do the attribution to finish off the sentence. But if you're doing a split quote, you'll be creating two sentences. So like the first half with the attribution will be one sentence, and then the second half will be another sentence. So yeah, just remember, most of the time you're going to be ending your quotes on a comma, unless it's the second half of a split quote. Let's see. And then so obviously, again, you guys know this, but it's really important when you're interviewing somebody to get their titles, their pronouns, the major and classification, if they're a student. You know, sometimes we can get away without, like, you know, if you forgot to get a certain sources, like a major or classification, sometimes we can get away with that. In general, though, make sure we get those little pieces of information. Also, this is another one that I notice from time to time. I feel like people, you know, get the writer's brain and are like, I need to say something besides said because it sounds like repetitious. Almost always just say said. It's easier. It's people don't notice that sort of repetition when it's just being used to signal attribution. So don't worry too much about that. You know, you can do like added and stuff like that every now and then, but generally speaking, just use said. When it comes to attribution on your second reference, always last name said. So it would be Lomax said. Never said Lomax. On first reference, if you haven't introduced somebody, you can do said editor-in-chief John Lomax. But if it's second reference, always do last name said. Let's see. And then most of the time, generally speaking, your quotes should be standalone graphs. Sometimes you can do like an in-graph quote, but like I don't really see the use for them a lot of times, at least from what we write. You know, it's just easier to make them be their own graph and kind of having them be their own thought. It also makes it easier to structure your story because it's sort of like, you know, information leading up to the quote, and then like explanatory information. Also, y'all just feel free to jump in or stop me if y'all have any questions or anything like that. Are we all good so far?
Yeah. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Cool. Okay.
I was going to say something. So what if before you quote someone and you're kind of paraphrasing, you know, before a quote, do you still have to say said? I mean, can you say, you know, during a paraphrase? How about that?
Generally speaking, I would say said. Paraphrases can get a little interesting though, because if you are paraphrasing it, you are kind of saying that they didn't just directly say this. So I think it's okay to use other terms. But it's just like, again, it gets a little weird when you go with other terms. So like if you are using like an added or something like that, or something else, or especially like, I know.
Stated. How about like stated, you know?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, but I mean, I would only, it's like I would have to find a reason to use the word stated instead of said, you know, besides trying to avoid looking repetitious, you know, because if like somebody like, you know, if what you're paraphrasing was said in a way that was like more emphatically stated, I think that would be okay. But just really stick to said unless you can think of a really good reason not to. Would be my advice.
And this may be another like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So like, let's say you did like an email interview instead of like an in-person interview, you would still say said, right? Because that's what I do sometimes. I say said.
It depends. So yeah, like if you are just exchanging questions over an interview, I think it's okay to say said. You know, like if that's how you're doing your interview. However, if it's like a mass email that was sent out, you know, like alerting the university about something, generally I would say like the email said or something like that, or the email read, just because, you know, this is an email that everybody got, you know, and so like it's not as personal. Whereas like with email, when you're doing an interview through email and you're sending people questions, it's like I'm okay with said there because, you know, it is like the email is purely just like a medium for an interview. Whereas when it's like sending out a mass communication, the email itself is like the important part, if that makes sense, you know? And so in those cases, it needs to say like the email read, but you know, like I said, in the case of like we're just interviewing through text, I think it's fine to say said.
That was a good question. I was gonna say, you can hear me still, right?
Yeah.
So rare scenario, you have a question mark. You're in a quote. That's just gonna be in a question mark. You know, that might be a dumb question, but
You're saying you're like quoting somebody asking a question.
Yeah. So I felt like I've had that happen maybe once, where someone asks a question, where you're posing a question in a quote, you know, where someone says something, and so am I closing that off with a quotation marks and then blank said? Do I not have to have a comma there, or am I ending it off with a question mark?
So this is the type of thing when it comes to these style things. It's like there's probably a complicated solution to that question, but what I would do is just restructure it and include the question as a paraphrase, you know, and then use like something different for the quote, you know. So I paraphrase, you know, just like don't use, because it's, you know, I can't think of a whole lot of reasons why you would like you'd quote somebody on a question instead of just saying what they asked about this. So generally I try to avoid that, but also like don't think in terms of like, you know, you can have multiple sentences in a single quote. So like, you know, even if you had a question mark in a sentence, you could still keep going after that and then end it on a comma, but I wouldn't do like question mark, comma, close quote. You know, that's not it. But so your two options there would be to have a little bit of text after the question mark and then end in a question and end in a comma, or paraphrase it and then just restructure the quote.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, gotcha.
That was a good question, Robert. I had that question too.
Yeah, and this is all like, you know, it does depend on the context a lot of times. You know, if you know, you might be able to just do it. Yeah, generally I would just paraphrase it out, but that is a good question. Let's see, what else? Yeah, I think that's it for this one. Okay, first and second reference, little refresher. Obviously on first reference, include all applicable titles. If it's a longer title, like, you know, some people out here have crazy titles where it's like vice president of da-da-da to, you know, in support of the president, whatever. In those cases, generally, I would do, like, I would introduce their name first and then do like comma, they are the director of da-da-da-da-da. Because if you put a title before somebody's name, it needs to be capitalized. And like, you don't want to be capitalizing these huge titles. So like, you know, if I was the like sub director for print management, I would just do, instead of saying editor in chief John Lomax, I'd say John Lomax, comma, sub director for print management. And so like, you know, really just think when you're doing first reference for people, you know, to just include what is relevant, because some people will have multiple titles. So like, you know, you're trying to think about what is their role within my story. So like, let's talk about somebody like Renu Couture, who's got, you know, who's both president and chancellor. This is kind of nitpicky and it gets a little complicated, but you know, if she's acting in her capacity as president of UH, you would just say President Couture, right? But if she's acting in her capacity as chancellor of the University of Houston system, then you'd say Chancellor Couture. You don't need to include both every time, just what is relevant for the story. But then, regardless of who it is, it could be the president, it could be Renu Couture, it could be whoever. On second reference, you will always just use their last name, said. There are a few very niche exceptions to that, but nothing that we're going to get into today because it's not important. And in the same,
we would capitalize president, right?
If it's before a name. So President Couture, yes. But if you did Renu Couture, comma, the president of UH, then it would not be capitalized. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then so the same thing goes for organizations, right? On first reference, fully spell out the organization. So let's say something like CCA, Council for Cultural Activities. On the first reference, you will say CCA, or Council for Cultural Activities, sorry. And then on every reference after that, we're just going to abbreviate it, and we're going to assume that our readers can figure out that CCA means Council for Cultural Activities. Now, there are certain exceptions to that, like even things that aren't organizations, like COVID is a good example of one that you can just, every time you do it, you can just use that abbreviation. You don't have to explain. We all know what that is. Same for CIA. Something I wanted to jump back to, actually, on first reference, there is a slight exception, and this applies especially if you're going to be covering something like SGA. If somebody's a senator, you just do sen, period, so-and-so, and that's on first reference, but that's kind of niche as well. And then obviously with organizations and things, after you've introduced them, like Student Government Association on your first reference, on the second reference you'll circle back and just say SGA. And then another kind of exception to this that I know that y'all are familiar with, it's the big Cougar exception where whenever you say UH, you don't need to abbreviate it on the first time. We're going to assume, since they're reading the Cougar, they know what UH is. And you can also say the university, capital university. So those are, a couple exceptions to this, but in general, just think of it as you're introducing the person or thing fully on their first reference, and then to save space on every reference after that, you're just going to say their name or their, acronym for the organization. Any questions here? If not, I'm going to assume we're good. Let's see. Okay, this is where we get into some of the stuff that y'all might not be familiar with. So these are some, when it comes to like grammar and these kind of more niche marks, this is again another one of those things that if you don't know how to use it and you don't want to find out, you can just reword it to avoid having to follow these rules. However, they do give you learning these rules gives you like greater range of what you can write and how you can communicate. So, they are important to learn, but always know that like if you're looking at something, you're like, I don't have access to this style book right now and I don't really know how to word that. You can always just simplify it so we're not using like crazy grammar or crazy, diacritical marks. But so, what I wanted to cover a little bit today was dashes. So basically in AP style, there are two accepted forms of dashes. One of them is the hyphen. The hyphen is the, little dash that's located next to the plus sign on your keyboard. And now this is going to be used to make compound modifiers. And the compound modifiers is whenever you have two words that are forming an adjective, a single adjective. So like poorly dressed or well kept or small business. These will all be, if they're used in that adjective kind of way, then they will be a compound modifier. Obviously stuff like small business, like you can have a small business and that wouldn't be hyphenated, but a small business owner would be hyphenated because they are an owner, they are a small business owner, And so when we're making those compound modifiers, we use the hyphen, and then also for date ranges, like January 1 to the 4th. Whenever you use these, there will be no space. So it'll just be, dash, whatever. And then the other kind that we use, and these are a little weirder, is M dashes, okay? Not to be confused with N dashes. We do not use N dashes at all. M dashes are used for, this is when you're like more of a narrative signal, this is to assist you in your storytelling. So like, an abrupt change in a sentence, right? So like, Rena Couture's tenure as president was marked by adaptation, usually skillful, to a changing student body. I could say the same thing with commas, I'd have to restructure it, but I could give the same idea with commas. So, if you don't want to have to use M dashes, always remember you can find an easier way to communicate it. And then, so the other thing that we use them for are series within a phrase. So, Lomax listed qualities, honesty, wit, and loyalty that he appreciated in a journalist. So in that instance, the reason we're using the M dash is that we have, like a list of examples in the middle of a sentence that wouldn't, so if you were to use a comma, it would be kind of weird because it's just having this list in the middle. And so the em dash is kind of let you set it aside, and then while also having commas within the phrase that you've kind of pulled out there, if that makes sense. And part of the reason that I say, it's always, you can always explore easier ways of doing this is because em dashes are actually not on your keyboard at all. You got to do some crazy shit to get him on there. So in order to do an em dash, you have to hold Alt and then on your numpad type 0151. That's on Windows. It's easier on Mac, I think, but I don't know exactly how to do it. But yeah, that'll make an em dash. And another thing with em dashes is they will always have a space on both sides. And then usually you'll use two of them because you're like setting aside something. But yeah, and a little bit of background. So em dashes and en dashes are just referring to the length. So an en dash is roughly the length of a capital N, and then an em dash is roughly the length of a capital M. And this is one of those things that, like, historically people were trying to decide between en dashes and em dashes, and AP just decided to use em dashes. But like I said, don't worry about en dashes at all because you will not use them. All we worry about is em dashes. Okay, and then we get to semicolons. As far as I'm concerned, they're fake. Don't use them. I feel like 95% of the time that you could use that semicolon, you can just straight up use a period, or you can just do something else. But if you really want to use them, John, I really want to use that crazy colon. Fine, but they are used to clarify a series or link independent clauses. So when we're clarifying a series, so this guy, let's say he died. He is survived by a son, John Smith of Chicago, 3 daughters, and then we do semicolon 3 daughters because we're about to introduce all 3 of the daughters. So it's like we're already doing a list, right? We're listing off who survived him, and then we're doing a sub list that is like, okay, here are the names of the daughters, and so that's what it means by like clarify a series. We're introducing 3 daughters, and then we're clarifying who they are. And this is a really niche scenario. Like I copied this from the AP style book. This sentence was like a paragraph long because it was listing all the fucking daughters and shit. And it's just, I would avoid semicolons. I know if you use Grammarly for some reason likes to go crazy with them. It loves using semicolons, but I would generally avoid them. And then you also can link to independent clauses. The package was due last week, semicolon, it arrived today. And that's something that you would only ever really use in a quote. And so like some of these marks are good for like translating quotes, because like this is something that somebody like could have said speaking and would have made sense. Like there's a lot of intonation that goes in there to make this sentence make sense. Like the package was due last week, it arrived today. What we're trying to communicate there is that somebody's frustrated with it arriving today, even though it was due last week. And so, like you can use that for quotes and stuff, but generally speaking, I would really try to avoid semicolons, especially in the body of your text. And then I'm sure we've harped on this a ton. Commas, don't use an Oxford comma. I don't like this rule, but it is what it is. So I hate grammar, comma, 1 comma, spelling, and words. So obviously the Oxford comma is the second comma in a list of 3 things. And then I already went over this, but close quotes to the comma if you haven't attributed it. But so yeah, that's mainly what I wanted to cover today. But then we also have a couple of things, a couple of activities we can run through here. Y'all can still see my screen, right? Okay, cool. So
Yes,
Cindy,
yes.
cool, good. But Cindy typed this up. This is just kind of a fake story that we can run through together. Figure we can just go line by line as a group.
John, could you zoom in?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so yeah, we'll just go through kind of like the editing process here, and we'll see if we can together find any problems here. So do y'all see any issues in the lead? We could do a minute or so.
It has.
I go with the Cougar first.
What about it?
Well, it should be capitalized. The Cougar.
I think this is actually a rare instance where it
I think I'm misreading this. I think I'm thinking about the Cougar, like what we work for.
Yeah. No, that threw me off too. Yeah, and with more context, you'd understand better. But yeah, this is about the mascot, the live mascot. But that's a good point. And this is where the softer aspects of style come in, because we could be a lot more specific there, right? We could say like to bring whatever his name is, Shasta 7, the university's live mascot, back on campus. So that would be, I think that's, and you misunderstanding that pointed to exactly why we use style, because like this shit is confusing. So I think that is actually a good thing to point out. But I think that's pretty much the only issue in the lead. Let's go ahead.
I got a question. Question, John.
Go ahead.
Would early Tuesday morning be could that be considered redundant since it's like already morning and it's early?
No, because I think that you could say early Tuesday morning is okay if you said like if you did like this, like if you did like at 6 a.m. at 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, that would be repetitious, but it's okay to say early morning because there can be like late morning and early morning, so it's okay to specify that. Let's see. Okay, now looking at the nut graph. Now, do we see anything here?
What did you say was wrong with the first one again, with the Cougar? I'm sorry.
Well, that's more of like a soft thing. You kind of demonstrated what was wrong with it in that it's like we could be a lot more specific since we're talking about the university's live mascot, and this is sort of why like style things exist. So like in this case, it's not necessarily a style error, but I would definitely say, to bring Shasta 7, the live mascot, back to campus.
Okay.
But yeah.
Zookeeper shouldn't be capitalized.
That's correct. Yeah, should not be. Now, if this was, it would never be a title. Never mind. Yeah, if this was like Houston, Maine zookeeper so and so, and it was before a name, then yes, it would be capitalized. But yeah, you're correct, Nancy. This is not capitalized or should not be here. Now let's look at this first quote. Let me see anything.
I'll let you take this one, Robert.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh. So the said it should be after at the end, I guess.
This is actually a rare example of when it should be in the beginning. So
of course.
Yeah. This is my first time reading this too. I'm not trying to trip y'all up. But so when you haven't introduced somebody yet, it is okay to do said Psychology Junior Lucy Hale on first reference. That is the one exception to doing, to the last name said. But yeah, that's kind of tricky. But yeah, if you haven't introduced them yet, then it's okay to do this.
Yeah. So it's technically a first reference. Yes,
exactly. Like the reason I don't bring that up a ton is because usually what I do is I would have like paraphrase introduced this person up here, but this is a good tool to have to be aware of if you don't want to waste the space doing that, or it's not necessary. So yeah, let's go on to the next one. Let's see.
You can take this one, Robert.
Okay, well, this is the Oxford comma one.
Oh yeah. I think that might be. You see, and again, yeah, I wouldn't just. This is again not really style, but I wouldn't say the Cougar. That's just way too vague. Especially since they'd be reading this on the Cougar. It'd be weird. Let me see. Have been stationed on campus. Emergency situations. Looks good. All right, yeah, pretty sure that's good. Let's look at this next one.
I think there should be a comma in between animal and but,
Let me see.
since it's two independent clauses.
This one is weird. This is worded a little bit weirdly. Let me see. Many people believe the university does not have the choice to grow up.
I would say maybe the university, or maybe a university doesn't need to be capitalized, but I don't think a makes sense.
Yeah, no, that is like I would say the one major style error for. I think maybe you. Let me see if it gets from but supporters of. I'm not 100% sure on your comma question there, Nancy. Honestly, I'm not great with commas of that Grammarly, but
I think the but would make it okay to not have a comma. That would be my opinion.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking too.
That's just my opinion.
I think you're right, Robert. Yeah, because I think
it's
you don't need. I think since it's two independent clauses that are already conjoined by but, I don't think you need a comma. But I'm not 100 on that. But yeah, this second half of the sentence I just wouldn't do. I don't know what I can admit to have made it a reality. I guess would make more sense. But yeah, the university won't be the main error there because you only capitalize university when you're referring to UH specifically. Let's keep going though. Let's see. Do members of the University of Houston. So what do we see here?
I would go. I mean, you can say UH.
Yeah, I think that'd be the main one here, honestly. Let's see. UH association. This would depend on whether it's title or not. I might just do lowercase on that. If it is just called the UH Alumni Association, then maybe capitalize it. But assuming we're just talking about the gen, like this has got a different name, then I just say Alumni Association. But I actually think it is called the UH Alumni Association. Capitalizing this would be correct. And so yeah, I think that this sentence is pretty much solid. What do we see here?
Two, I think I learned, if I'm remembering correctly, in news writing, I learned that if any number under 10 must be spelt out, not, you don't use a number.
Yep, that's correct. Any 1 through 9, you're going to spell out every time. And an easy way to remember that is just kind of think about it. You know, it's like 2 is 3 letters. 27 is like 15 letters, you know? So, whenever we can just do like a 3 to 5 letter thing and we're going to type it out. But when it comes to like the bigger numbers, it makes sense to just do the numbers because we're not, it would be cumbersome to be typing out, like think about like 5,432, like that would be a ton of words that you could just do in one number. But yeah, correct. We will type out numbers 1 through 9. What else do we see here?
Does it have to do with capitalization of something of
It does.
the university?
Yep. Yeah, this is basically just the inverse of what we saw a couple of graphs ago. So if you're saying the, if you're using the word university and it's preceded by the, then it will be capital U. Because again, proper noun, because we are referring to a specific university. I think that's pretty much it there. Yeah, this is not style related, but I'm really interested. Which, is it in vain? Is that correct? Yeah, that is correct. No. So I'll just tell you all the last thing. This should just be Couture. Yeah, because we already introduced her in the lead. Yeah, honestly, in terms of errors, this isn't the worst copy in the world. You know, sometimes you'll have a lot more problems and stuff. But really, where style becomes crucial is when it comes to like attribution and stuff like that. Because, you know, if you don't have certain, like, you know, especially if something as crucial as their last name, then it's just like, you know, I could edit it as much as I want to, we just can't publish it because we don't like have the cornerstone stuff there. So, you know, like style is on the one hand presentation, but on the other hand, there are certain style rules that, like, if they're not followed, can like outright prevent like a piece from being published. And, you know, like that always sucks. So, you know, really kind of familiarize yourself with the core important style things, like, you know, attribution. And then something that we didn't really get into today because I have it saved for another workshop is kind of, you know, when we start to talk about more sensitive topics, using things like saying disabled people or, you know, referring you to stuff like suicide, you know, when it's okay to say that. We'll get into that in another one, but those are also important style aspects you should look into, because, you know, it's really like style is just the relationship between the writer, the reader, and like the law, you know, a lot of times, because we're trying to avoid confusion with the readers and ourselves, and then we're also trying to avoid getting sued for saying some shit for, you know, like an accidental turn of phrase becoming a defamation suit, you know. So, you know, really just kind of think about what the kind of core, you know, aspects of style are. Like I said, you know, attribution and then like certain terms. And I would say, like, you know, if you want to build up, like become good at style, start from there and then just kind of expand. And really a great way, I found a very roundabout way, if you don't have access to the style book, and you want to know if it's how to do a certain term or something like that, is you can just look at other like articles, you know, and try to find that word, because they'll probably be following AP style. And you know, also just read professional journalism, because you know, it's helped me a lot when I'll see like, you know, certain things that like I've been editing before and I've been like, oh wait, is that, how do you use that? But, you know, you can be fairly confident when you see it in the Chronicle or when you see it in the New York Times or something that is the correct style recommendation. So with a few exceptions, specifically with the New York Times, they call everybody like Mr. and Miss. We don't do that. That's cringe, you know. So just bear that in mind. But generally speaking, you know, reading can help a lot. But that's pretty much all I have. Did y'all have any questions or anything else y'all wanted to cover while we're here?
So we can meet online or in person, right?
Yeah, I've been doing it just kind of exclusively online because I've kind of been like, let me know if you're going to come in person, and then I'll set up outside. Yeah, but yeah, we do it in person as well. But just like give me a little heads up so I can like set up the whiteboard and stuff. Okay. But yeah, we'll be doing this pretty much for the entire summer. I'll like send out what the topic will be before we have it, and yeah.
So we're only doing this just for the summer, and we're gonna discontinue this in the fall?
We're gonna see if I have time in the fall.
Okay.
I have time right now. You know, we'll be doing print obviously in the school year, and then I'll have classes as well. So if I have time, I'm gonna try to keep doing them. But if not, I might adjust it to a different day or something like that. But I will try to have more workshops and stuff like that for y'all.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So y'all enjoy the rest of your days, and let me know if you have any questions or anything.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Yep.
Thank you, John.
Yep. See y'all.
Have a good day. Thank you.